Oh,
Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today for our first book sandwich in of the season. My name is Dina Viviani, and I'm the programming librarian here. I'm just going to start with a few housekeeping announcements before we get started. First, excuse me. Sorry about that. There's a need to evacuate the building. The door on my right, your left, is our closest exit. For anyone using a hearing aid, we invite you to take advantage of our induction loop system. It amplifies all sound coming through the microphone. And please silence or turn off your cell phones now so as not to disrupt our speaker. And at the end, we ask that you use the microphone for all questions and comments so that everyone can participate. We also have our ASL interpreter here today, and we are recording as well. So please make sure to direct any questions so that our interpreter can also hear and make sure everything is recorded. And we'd like to thank the Friends of Brighton Memorial Library for sponsoring this program and our whole BSI series. Please grab one of the BSI and or October brochures at the door on your way out and help yourself to any snacks or water as you need. And now I will introduce our speaker. So I pulled this from a lovely article that the RIT website had written when Lou had announced his retirement. So I just condensed this a bit because there are many, many more things to say about his accomplishments. So Lou Spiotti retired on June 30th, 2021 as the nation's longest tenured intercollegiate athletic director, following 47 years of service at RIT, including the last 41 as executive director of intercollegiate athletics. He arrived at RIT in 1974 as head football coach before being tapped to lead the department in 1980. RIT experienced unprecedented success and growth during his tenure, expanding from 15 programs to 24, 12 for both men and women, including 2 Division I ice hockey teams, as well as over 650 student athletes and staff. The teams achieved national prominence under Spiotti's watch, particularly in hockey, lacrosse, and basketball. Academic success was also always important to Spiotti, and this was reflected in the athletic department's cumulative grade point average, which regularly exceeded that of the overall student body. He spearheaded multiple athletic facility upgrades over the years and helped steer many of the conferences RIT was a member of. A Rochester native, Spiotti was an All-American football player at Aquinas Institute and was also a multiple title-winning boxer. He went on to a standout football career at Ithaca College, where he was a member of the 1965 team that finished as the only undefeated team in the program history. He joined the U.S. Navy in 1969, serving as the director of athletics for the Atlantic Fleet in Newport, Rhode Island. For his body of work as an athlete, coach, administrator, Spiotti has earned induction into 7 sports halls of fame. Now, this was from 2021, so you're just going to have to tell me if this is still correct. He lives with his wife, Lynn, in Greece, New York, and they have 2 daughters, Lisa and Kristen, 3 grandchildren, Dylan, Drew, and Alexandra. All right, no one has been added to the family. Sometimes that happens when I get the bios. So with that, I am now passing the mic over to Lou. Thank you.
thank you, Dina. One correction.
I'm just going to I'm going to unmute.
Okay.
And the other pocket. Sorry.
I'm wired for sound here.
Yeah. Here we go. Unmute.
Testing.
Oh. Try now.
Testing. Can you hear me?
No.
You probably won't need a mic.
Here we go. Okay, now.
But you need.
Here we go.
Okay, there we are. All right. Yeah, one correction. I was inducted into my 8th Hall of Fame last fall.
Ooh, yay.
I won't let that go by. Well, thank you very much, Dina. It's very nice to be here. Kind of you to invite me and be part of this nice group. I have done one book review before at the Rochester Public Library, and it was about the book Coach Wooden and Me. Fascinating book written by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar about the great UCLA basketball coach John Wooden, and it's phenomenal, and I loved it. And I had done that book review for them at the public library. But it's nice to have you all here, and I hope that you'll find this interesting. I'm sure you all have read the book, and so I will get underway. I want to thank Alyssa for being here today. Old colleague of mine. I shouldn't say old, former colleague of mine. But it's great to see you, and thank you for being here and handling the responsibilities of communication to the deaf and hard of hearing. So, first and foremost, I need to give credit to the author, Thomas Fuller. Think about it. It takes inspiration, vision, and courage to do what he did. Fuller was a former foreign correspondent and leading authority on Southeast Asia and held the position of page one correspondent for the New York Times. He's written breaking news that's captured pivotal moments in history and has helped shape public discourse. And from what I can tell, this was his one and only foray into the world of sports, and specifically the arena of deaf athletic competition. If this is true, then I can say in all honesty that he did an admirable job of capturing a truly remarkable accomplishment by a small group of tenacious young men who, by the way, just happened to be deaf. For not having a significant background from what I was able to tell in the world of sports and the deaf culture, he managed to amply provide this reader, and hopefully you as well, with a compelling account of a group of deaf student athletes and how they came together to overcome adversity and dispel myths about their uphill battle against some formidable competition on their way to a state championship in California. There's a simple but relevant quote about this adventure, and it goes something like this. I'd read it before. You cannot discover new oceans unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. Thomas Fuller discovered an ocean of knowledge and experience through his journey in the Boys of Riverside. As I read and reread parts of the book, it resonated with my own life, working some 47 years on a campus that welcomed the establishment of NTID, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, by President Lyndon Baines Johnson, and what a dynamic and positive feature it was for RIT. Aside from the fact that it bolstered enrollment, it, without question, enriched the educational environment like no other college or university could rival. So I'm here to attest that deaf and hard of hearing students became immersed in every aspect of campus life. One NTID student rose to the position of president of student government. Amazing guy. I personally coached 3 outstanding deaf players on our football team, and as director of athletics, oversaw the inclusion of many others across our entire athletics program. It was an experience of a lifetime for me. One in particular was a tremendous defensive lineman. This was a football player whose reaction to movement was off the charts, which Fuller so wonderfully chronicles in the book. He was instantaneously in the opponent's backfield as soon as the ball was snapped. A true story. At times he drew offsides penalties because officials were just not used to such quickness. It was truly an honor to coach these wonderful young men, and it was heartening to see them embraced by their teammates. Sometimes I think we learn more from them and then they from us. The author takes the reader through an intriguing account of this team's march to a state title, albeit not entirely easy. As a matter of fact, the team overcame some insurmountable odds, the most significant of which was the fact that deaf athletes were not being taken seriously. But that was about to change. The second was that California and the nation was emerging from the COVID pandemic. I, for one, know that it was incredibly challenging for those engaged in contact sports during that difficult time. This is the backdrop as we foray through the intriguing elements of Fuller's documentation of the Boys of Riverside. He gives us a historical perspective about the growth and development of California, its ties to the naval orange industry, and the immigration factor that helps support the industry, thus contributing to the explosion of the Riverside, California population to approximately 300,000. The game played by CSDR, California School for Deaf Riverside, Cubs, was an 8-man football version of the 11-man football game. a game that neither you or I are overly familiar with, and I'm not as a football person, football coach. I was looking it up on Google. I'm saying, what is this? And I didn't know that much about it, so it was interesting. It was expanding for me to see that. It is tackle full contact football, but only with 8 men on the field at a time on both offense and defense. The rules are modified to fit smaller squads in schools with smaller enrollments, such as CSDR. The field is a bit shorter, 80 versus 100 yards, and more narrow, 50 versus 54 yards. Interestingly enough, the game has a mercy rule. I thought this was incredibly amazing, which allows for a running clock, no timeouts, no stop clock. When the ball goes out of bounds, it complete pass, the clock keeps on running. If a team is behind by 32 or more points in the fourth quarter, which is a lean into the form of the game that experiences higher scoring than regular 11-man football. 11-man football, more people on the field, it's crowded. Someone's going to bump into you, someone's going to grab you, and that's the way the game is at 22 versus 16. The 8-man game has grown in popularity, as mentioned, for schools with smaller enrollments and a smaller male population. But think of it, this book might have not ever been written were it not for the 8-man game. While I have seen the growth and popularity of football level off a bit, 8-man football provides the opportunity for youngsters to benefit from what I consider to be a tremendous educational and character-building experience. Ultimately, and I believe this, as a football player, many years playing the game at all levels, and as a football coach, assistant and head coach, I consider it to be a tremendous educational and character-building experience. Ultimately, football can and does teach skills that cannot be easily taught in a classroom or anywhere for that matter. I often remind myself of a quote, and you'll hear some quotes from me throughout this presentation. I'm famous for that. Quote by legendary football coach Vince Lombardi. You've heard of the Lombardi Trophy for the Super Bowl. That's who it's named after. Contrary to the opinion of many people, leaders are not born. Leaders are made, and they are made by effort and hard work. And that's Lombardi. That's him in a nutshell. Hard work. One very interesting outcome that you probably realize, games are very often high scoring and a result of more open field space, which allows more scoring opportunities. Thus, the reference to the 8-man game as football on steroids. Did you read that? Remember reading that? I thought that was interesting. This indeed is a departure for an old warhorse like me, who was brought up in the Woody Hayes era. Woody Hayes was an Ohio State football coach many years ago. And the 3 yards in a cloud of dust philosophy. It's grinding out first down after first down so the offensive team can eventually close in on the goal line. That's bit by bit by bit, right? And then eventually score. How boring. I mean, that's the way the game was played many years ago. Instead, a missed tackle or two in the 8-man game oftentimes can end up as an exciting touchdown. And I think these days when you watch the game at all levels, particularly the professional level, the amazing athletes that play the game, that scoring is, you'll see more of that. The ball's in the air a lot, and the speed and the strength of these players is amazing. And so you're seeing higher scoring games. An interesting footnote, Buffalo's own Josh Allen, who had mentioned that before, played 8-man football, which I dare to suggest contributed to his remarkable passing and running skills, as he had probably gotten plenty of experience with both in the 8-man game. Finally, I would venture to say that the game of football is a powerful tool for teaching teamwork and leadership skills. It strengthens character and lays the foundation for future successes. In this book, the story is replete with examples of strong leadership and resiliency, teaching in the young men who had to overcome obstacles, not just their deafness. I thought the author did a fine job fleshing out these examples. And I'll read something to you. One of my coaches handed this to me several years ago, one of our coaches. And it says, the title of the article is, "What's Better for Your Resume?" Captain of the debate team or playing college sports? What's better for your resume? Playing college sports could have a big payoff after graduation, as employers in one recent study appeared to value the leadership skills of athletes above many other students. The study, whose results are to be presented at a conference this week at the University of South Carolina at Columbia, asked employers to rate the value of experience of more than a dozen types of students, including debate team captain, resident assistant, and editor of the campus newspaper. The employers, which were known to hire athletes, gave high marks to many graduates who held leadership positions. But athletes, particularly those who were captains of NCAA teams, scored the highest. And the reason? Among the reasons, the employers saw athletes as hardworking, goal-oriented, and have the ability to handle pressure. And so it's a great learning experience, definitely. I don't know if there are any more compelling story of character, tenacity, and flat-out courage than in the first chapter where Fuller tells of the homeless player, Philip Castaneda, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, who slept in a parking lot in his father's car across from CSDR football field, where he hoped to play one day. He slept in the car, used the restrooms in the strip mall, stores, and showered in the gym, all so he could one day play for CSDR Cubs. He was a gifted athlete, and his dad knew it. Philip persevered in spite of these tremendous odds and became not only a team member, but a key player as well. It's a great story, which brings to mind another quote. It's my second one. Don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion. Said by none other than Muhammad Ali. The book traces CSDR along the growth and the prosperity of the state of California. Riverside's population explosion was an outgrowth of the naval orange industry, I had mentioned that before, which helped market California to the country and the world. Bolstered home construction, auto dealerships, and the construction of warehouses. CSDR was the only state-run school for the deaf. It opened up in 1953 and was a model campus functionally and visually, except for the football stadium, which was not. And Fuller talks about that later on. The first football season took place in 1956. Since then, the program has had only 9 winning seasons and 52 losing seasons. Think of it. This school, its leadership, and state officials, for that matter, felt that the game itself, in spite of the team's lack of success, was a valuable tool that they were willing to support in spite of losing seasons. Excuse me. There are not too many institutions at any level that would be willing to stick with a program, the student athletes and the coaches like that. I give them a lot of credit. Particularly important for this group of students. The first game of record during the account was against an all-Native American team that the Cubs had lost to in the previous season and seasons before. The Noli Indian team, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that properly. If anyone does, please correct me. The author does bring to light many of the challenges the Noli athletes also faced, and I think you can imagine that. It was a small squad, but with some very big players. Big, yes, but not big enough to stay up with the Cubs, who were a very quick team. The season would be different, however. This season would be different, with the Cubs handing the Braves a 68-0 beating, 68 points to 0. And this was a precursor of things to come. The results of rigorous off-season training and preseason preparation, not so appropriately referred to as Hell Week, paid off for the Cubs. Coach Adams was not at all hesitant to remind his players of the way the previous season ended. He did not treat these young men with kid gloves either. One would think that there might be a bit of empathy exercised by the coaches because they were dealing with a special population. Not so. Coach Adams and his entire staff were also deaf. And his story, Coach Adams' story, is unbelievably remarkable. That guy, he deserves so much credit. They walked a mile and then some in their shoes, and Coach Adams in particular faced some horrendous adversity as a boy and a young man. It was apparent that they were not going to back off in driving this team to greatness. Preseason practices traditionally are grueling experiences. I can attest to that, both as a player and as a coach. I think I made my team's experiences more grueling than I went through. Yet the use of a fraternity sorority rush term can lead to some misconceptions, fears, and possible legal issues. Nonetheless, conditioning was a key element in their durability and competitiveness throughout the season and at key points in the game. I personally was never one to skimp on wind sprints and long and grueling conditioning sessions. The coaching staff certainly did well in physically preparing these young men for battle. Fuller gives some insight on deafness and the deaf culture. I thought he delved into this well, and I learned quite a bit by reading this. Working in an environment where they were deaf and hard of hearing, you'd think that I knew it all, but I don't even, not even close to knowing it all. But he brought some things forward that I thought were enlightening for me. I give him much credit. In chapters 9, 10, and 11, the author does well by imprinting upon the reader a foundation of understanding of deafness through the centuries. At its earliest times, those who were born deaf were oftentimes poorly treated. And maybe that's an understatement. In some civilizations, they were treated inhumanely and lived their lives with very few rights and very few opportunities. He traces those early times up to a point where manual communication became an accepted form of communication, and even interestingly, an advantage in some situations, as he points out, on the football field. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. My experience coaching deaf and hard of hearing athletes brought me an awareness of their rapid reaction to movement. As stated by Fuller, deafness is in a category of its own. The commonality between the sport of football and deafness, as Fuller points out, is uncanny. They are both tactile types, which puts deaf players to somewhat of an advantage. Our defensive middle guard, Tom Pep, was often the first to move on either side of the ball because he moved on the slightest movement, not on the quarterback signals. So he was instantaneous. I mean, it was just remarkable. Sometimes he was in the opponent's backfield before the quarterback even took a step. Now, I attribute that in part to his deafness, but would never discount his true athletic ability and IQ. Tom was remarkable, and what a guy he was to coach. He and his two other deaf teammates were outstanding players, but more importantly, people of strong character. The team embraced them and learned quite a bit about themselves in the process. It was sort of a microcosm of the larger university community. Later in the book, opponents marveled at the teamwork and communication skills of the CSDR players, saying they were the best communicating team they had ever seen. They were able to get information to one another via ASL faster than anybody could shout out to somebody, we're going that way, we're going to use this play. They didn't do that. They were using manual ASL. And no one on the other side of the line of scrimmage knew what was being said. So it was great. And they talk later on in the book about playing deaf teams, other deaf teams. They had a deaf team championship. And they thought, gee, this is a great opportunity for us now to trash talk. And our opponents understanding what was being said. Yeah. There's a theory that deaf individuals have to develop their other senses to compensate for their inability to hear, and I truly believe this, especially from an athletic standpoint. And there was no better example of this than with three All-American wrestlers we had, and Melissa will probably remember them, John Reed, Tony Wallace, and three-time national champion Matt Hamill. Three-time national champion. They excelled in sensing movements and space dynamics, and I have never seen anyone as good at his craft than Matt Hamill was. He transferred RIT from a Division I school where there was little or no support for deaf students, let alone deaf student athletes. While unfortunate, RIT NTID benefited greatly from this lack of support because Matt flourished in the RIT NTID environment. He was an unusual combination of athletic intelligence and flat-out determination. not to mention his brute strength. He went on from his first year with us to win 3 national championships in 3 different weight classes, and was named National Division III Wrestler of the Year all 3 years when he was at RIT. He, Tony, and John were all inducted into the RIT Hall of Fame. Matt went on to become an outstanding MMA fighter. And then there was the Hollywood movie made about him called The Hammer. Make a note of that. If you could see it on Netflix or wherever. My character, by title, had a small part in the movie as a tough disciplinarian. They didn't name my name. What else? Matt and I had a great relationship, and I remember his last year, he was going to the national championships, and Lynn will remember this. I went out and it was in New Jersey, and New Jersey University. And he was wrestling against the defending national champion. Okay, and it was the finals, and the place was packed, the gym, and people were going crazy, and they were all whispering, "Wait until you see this guy. Wait until you see this guy." Well, he came out, and he was wrestling a national champion. He came out, and the national champion came out, and they, bumped hands, and then he came after Matt like you would not believe, and that was the end of it. Matt turned him over and pinned him, like it was in 30 seconds. People went crazy. So, talk about an accomplishment. We had numerous outstanding deaf student athletes during my career, and I'd mentioned Alyssa. Christine Gray was a tremendous volleyball player and softball player, All-American. Natalie Snyder, swimmer, All-American. And we had many of them like that who were very successful in our program. I want to go on by saying that this was not only a true life story about a deaf team, but it was the continuation of how sports serve as a platform for great achievement. In some ways, their deafness served as a bonding element that few other opponents experienced. We see this play out in the book all the way along. The commonality that existed amongst the Cubs players was a powerful factor. They shared many of the same life challenges. They set out to prove that deafness brought them closer and more unified. Big factor. And George Allen, the legendary coach of the Washington Redskins, now the Commanders, reminded his players that 22 men together cannot be defeated. History is replete with similar stories. Think of it. You know them. Rudy, Miracle, the 1980 gold medal winners in hockey. Invincible. And then there's the story about Jim Thorpe. And I brought the book along. You want to take a peek at it. Army versus Carlisle. And the Cinderella Man, Jim Bradford, who was a heavyweight champion boxer. Awe-inspiring true life stories of overcoming insurmountable obstacles. This book falls in that category and is certainly material for its own movie. Deaf actors, you say? Let us not forget the award-winning movie star Marlee Matlin. Very, very talented. And Lou Ferrigno, one of my heroes, the Incredible Hulk. So now let's jump back into the 2022 season and the build-up to it. As was told, the Cubs had a very successful 2021 season, winning all but one game. Many of the games were blowouts, with the Cubs enjoying significant margins of victory. Got to make sure I stay on time here. Okay, all right. Scoring 60, 70, and even 80 points in one contest. And that contest was against UCA, not USC. They escaped a near disaster against Calvary Chapel, where their lack of size and conditioning was a significant factor, a direct result of not having access to fitness facilities during the pandemic. But in that game, a last-ditch game-saving catch allowed them to maintain possession and run out the clock. Final score was 66-57. That's a lot of points. Now, the team's success was attracting attention from the media. The New York Times, Good Morning America, The Today Show, NBC News, and ABC News, which named the team Persons of the Week. Such success resulted in private and public funding for new facilities. and I'm sure the football field got improved later on. Also, by a byproduct of the Cubs' success was the interest on the part of the media on how deaf athletes were able to leverage their disability in the field of athletic competition. ASL, too, was acquiring more visibility at the national level. And, walking around our campus, you will see so many students communicating manual communication, ASL, and it's normal. People understand it, that that's the way life is, and it's a beautiful thing. In 2021, which is before their championship season, their undefeated season success would force a matchup against the powerhouse Faith Baptist, which you read about. As stated, the author, the boys of Riverside may have taken the game and Faith a bit too lightly. Coach Adams, probably the only mistake I saw him make in the book, sent them home for Thanksgiving break before the big title game. But Faith did not let up. It was business as usual. They continued their preparation, practices and conditioning intensified as a result. They took a measure of the Cubs by a score of 74-22. It was a bitter loss, but one they would not forget, nor would Coach Adams allow them to do so, as we will learn later in the story. This was a lesson that they would long remember, and I must say it was a significant miscalculation. There's no question that Faith Baptist was better prepared physically and mentally. The aftermath of the championship game loss was heartbreaking for the boys of Riverside, but it was also a point of pride. They made it so far. There was so much support and notoriety for the team. Coach Adams, I must say, was such a positive role model. His acknowledgement of the team publicly and privately was nothing short of admirable. He, I believe, is as strong a leader as I have ever seen, and hundreds of coaches I have known over the span of my career. I would have been proud and fortunate to have him on our staff coaching deaf and hearing athletes. The team was recognized 2 months later at the Super Bowl, SoFi Stadium. For the Cubs players representing the team at the coin toss, it was a joyous occasion and big step for the program and the deaf community. Sometimes, in life it takes one person or one team to make a difference in the fortunes and futures of many. In some cases, it's a school or sometimes a community. In other cases, it's a population that has been taken for granted, stereotyped, and minimized. The boys of Riverside made that kind of impact. While their accomplishment caught the attention of the country and their school, it was not enough for this small but determined group of young men and their coaching staff. So as the team returned for the 2022 season, it was with renewed determination, an off-season commitment to strength and conditioning, and one player, Andre Vonier, grew to 6 feet 4 inches tall and 240 pounds. The effort in practice and contact drills pleased the coaches. There was also a reference to cleaning up their diets, which is not particularly easy to do with that age category. My wife is trying to help me with that as well. It's an uphill battle, right, honey? This brings to mind yet another but powerful saying coined by Mr. Lombardi: the harder you work, the harder it is to surrender. The first game was against Chadwick, a private school from Palos Verdes Peninsula, an affluent community. Chadwick looked down their noses at CSDR. They were better than them. It would be the first time Chadwick would play against an all-deaf team. At that time, none other than Kurt Warner, NFL Hall of Famer and subject of Hollywood movie American Underdog. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's a great movie. It's a true story. The first game was never close, 54-16. However, it was not an entirely sporting event either. Chadwick coaches and players complained voraciously about penalties that were not called against the Cubs, and I could see that happening. I could see those kinds of complaints coming out. Not true, not accurate, but finding an excuse, basically. All right, where did I leave off? That's something that coaches more than anyone should never allow to happen, especially when working with young and impressionable athletes. The next game would be against, billed as the Deaf Championship of California, the Cubs against the California School for the Deaf in Fremont, California, or North versus South. The Cubs had suffered a crushing defeat crushing defeats at the hands of Fremont over a stretch of 6 years. They were another team that looked down their noses at the Cubs. Both teams now saw the game as an opportunity to establish or reestablish superiority. There was no love lost between the two. One comment that I found amusing was that the players now saw this as an opportunity to finally trash talk the other team. This time it was using ASL. Again, Coach Adams reminded his team of the trashings they'd taken at the hands of Fremont, and the Cubs dominated 54-6. They were on a roll. Next was Indiana School for the Deaf, second in a string of 3 games versus deaf teams. Again, the Cubs dominated by a score of 62-18. The third all-deaf team was against the Florida School for Deaf and Blind. There was plenty of speculation about the outcome, not whether the Cubs would win or lose, but by how much. The 100 points number was jokingly batted around. It was no joke. Riverside won by a score of 84-8. The aftermath again brought criticism towards the Cubs for running up the score. Had the mercy rule not been in effect, the Cubs may have actually been in the triple digits, and they were scoring a machine. But I did have a feel of poor sportsmanship. It did have a feel of poor sportsmanship. To me, this doesn't feel like football. It's been said that football is all about fundamentals, specifically blocking and tackling are what the game is all about which the team wins the battle in the trenches. This point is given attention later on in the book. Without delving too far into the pigskin culture, I would recommend that you read the book, The 100-Yard War. It's by Greg Emanuel. It brings the Ohio State's Woody Hayes to light. I think it would give you real insight to the game of inches. Or watch the movie. This is an interesting movie, The Junction Boys, which chronicles Bear Bryant's football training camp at Texas A&M before he got to Alabama. It would be a real eye-opener for you. The next game was against Calvary Chapel, and it would be yet another resounding blowout, 66-6, but a big loss in the sense that the Cubs lost their top athlete, one of their top athletes, Felix Gonzalez, to a leg fracture as he was attempting to catch a TD pass. He collided with a defender, resulting in the fracture of his lower leg. He was shipped off to the hospital where the doctors declared him out for the season due to a mid-shaft fracture of his tibia. This put one of their best athletes on the team out for the season, a serious blow to the team's future. They all knew how valuable he was. Unfortunately, Felix was just a few yards away from breaking the school receiving record. The next game would be played without Felix, and so Fuller did well in paying tribute to this young man, what he meant to the team and how they reacted in the aftermath. A real testament to the character of the team and the coaches. The next game was against UCA, and it had to be played without Felix. His replacement would be Gio Visco, a phenomenal athlete in his own right who was 5 feet 9 inches tall and had a size 13 shoe. How could that be? Guess he had good stability, I don't know. I was 5 feet 9 at one time before I started getting shorter. Yeah. He had a cousin, Luca, who was also on the team and a fine athlete himself. They both shined in the game against UCA Eagles, 66-12 win for the Cubs. Again, a game where CSDR was accused of running up the score. Actually, it occurs to me that it might be more difficult to keep the scoring down when the sheer nature, of the 8-man game is a very wide open one. Even ordinary plays such as inside running plays could result in long runs and sudden touchdowns. Nonetheless, the Cubs were now entering the postseason playoffs, and without 2 of their finest players, Gonzalez and Joey Valencia. Joey was diagnosed with walking pneumonia, so his ability to play in the game was doubtful. Cubs were the number 1 seed and playing a very tough leadership military academy. Earlier in the season, the Wolfpack gave the Cubs quite a scare. Now with two of their best players out, this game was possibly on the upset watch list. Joey showed up for the game, but looking very sickly. He approached his assistant coach, begging him to play. So he gave his coach a big hug, and the coach was concerned that he might also contract pneumonia himself. But he said on second thought, he remarked, "Pneumonia is temporary, winning is forever." Final score against a very tough leadership military academy was 52-6. Guess they weren't very tough, you know. Navy. In the aftermath of the game, the military leadership academy coach predicted that the Cubs would make it to the championship game, but lose it by 2 touchdowns. So again, the Cubs are being underestimated and underrespected. The next opponent was against Flint Ridge Prep, an elite school in suburban LA with a $41,000 annual tuition. The game was underway with some back and forth, closer than the Cubs leaders anticipated. The halftime score was 24-20, with the Cubs holding the thinnest of leads, which left them scrambling in response to Flint Ridge's competitiveness. Coaches huddled and strategized. The team came out and scored on the third play on offense and marched to a 58-28 victory. Immediately after the game, Coach Adams spent a little time talking about the victory. He quickly reminded them of the score from last year's championship game against Faith Baptist. And this guy was a master motivator. Reminiscent of the famous quote by baseball great Satchel Paige when he said, "Don't look back, you're not going that way." Good point. It was Faith Baptist against Grace Brethren to determine the Cubs' opponent. It was dubbed as the Clash of the Christian Schools. The game was over quickly and mercilessly by a score of 74-22, and now Faith was poised to rematch with Riverside. The author masterfully recounts the setting. While we all well know what the outcome would be, the excitement and anticipation could not be avoided. Excuse me. The big game would be 6 short days away. Faith Baptist enters the game undefeated and highly favored to successfully defend its title. Coach Adams and his staff went to work right away, and do I know that feeling? My first experience coaching football was at college football was at U of R for a master planner and motivator and close friend, Pat Stark. His planning and organization skills were exceptional, but also incredibly demanding. Coach Adams' approach is reminiscent of Coach Stark's when preparation is compressed in just a handful of days. And just think of it, you're playing week by week, scouting, practicing, preparing. We as coaches met on Saturday nights and all day Sunday preparing game plans and looking at films. You know, it was really demanding. It was an eye-opener for me, and sometimes I thought, wow, this is what the profession's all about. The precursor to the championship was punctuated with stark reminders of the previous year's embarrassing loss to Faith Baptist via pictures of players in tears, and the previous final score, pasted all over the locker room. They had players wearing Faith jerseys and a tall teacher's aide playing the role of Faith's Baptist sizable tight end. And they had a way to defend him that was pretty unique. No stone was left unturned. Coach Adams and his staff weren't about to allow the repeat of the previous year's outcome. And again, reminiscent of one of my favorites, Coach John Wooden's famous line is, "Failing to prepare is preparing to fail." Pure and simple. It should be noted there was some resentment, jealousy of Faith Baptist by many league members. In spite of this, Faith's request to play the title game at a neutral field with a larger capacity and a better overall stadium quality was approved by the league officials. The stadium was a mere 20 minutes from their own campus. It was more suitable for the title game, capacity, lighting, and turf field. Setting was surreal. It was thought that the combination of LA traffic and the feeling expectation that this would be a repeat of last year's domination resulted in a lower amount of spectatorship. However, for the first time, first team sensed something different about CSDR, and perhaps it was the chilling stare of the Cubs players during warm-up, a message that this time they meant business. This is interesting. After the national anthem, a brief prayer from the MC was read. And you know, in my world, PA announcers aren't called MCs, but Fuller pulled that term out of the air, I guess. He thought MC was the right word. The game was underway, starting with 3 consecutive faith penalties. Shortly afterwards, the Cubs were on the scoreboard with Trevin Adams, and Trevin is son of the coach, Keith Adams. In short order, the faith quarterback took the ball to the end zone, and now the score was 8-6. After an interception, the faith offense had their hands on the ball again, and their quarterback and team leader. Shortly after, the ball was in Swadling's hands on a keeper to the end zone. The Cubs were suddenly trailing, and Fuller, according to Fuller, losing 12-8 after less than a quarter of play. Then he veers into this. I thought this was an interesting segment. He veers it right towards the end of the book into a very short but meaningful topic and line of thinking in chapter 32. He devotes 2 pages to it, but to me it's very poignant in that he calls it the psychology of winning, the mysteries and mechanics of successful teamwork. 2 interesting descriptions. But at any rate, he touches on the special bond that the boys of Riverside had. The bond is their deafness and the challenges that they share and the strength and resiliency that it forged in their lives physically, intellectually, emotionally, and beyond. These young men were on the verge of greatness and immortality, in part due to the commonality. It certainly is not something that Faith Baptist could comprehend. They, the Cubs, were able to taste success last year. Success, but not excellence. The championship would indeed underscore their strong bond, unity, and oneness. The Cubs, now behind by a narrow margin, prompted the call for a successful screen pass that unfortunately was called back because of a penalty, and then was followed by a long but unsuccessful pass play. Then the Cubs resorted to a ground game to get back into field position. Ground game, I mean by not passing, running with the ball. It worked, and it was with an improvised quarterback keep and a long pass which got them the first down. They were now on the 2-yard line. Wisely keeping the ball on the ground, the Cubs quickly scored a TD and went into the lead 14-12. Then he goes back into another line of thinking. The next chapter, he breaks up the game with a chapter about what this game is all about, blocking and tackling. And oh, do I know that. Winning the wars in the trenches. Perhaps you remember my reference to the 100-Year War and 3 yards of the cloud of dust. That's what he's talking about. Interestingly enough, I was writing this segment on a Monday evening during the Monday Night Football game between the Chicago Bears. They were called the Monsters of the Midway, if any of you remember that, and the Minnesota Vikings of the Black and Blue Division, which turned out to be a real battle, with the Vikings rallying to win a big rivalry game in front of the national audience. Credit to Coach Adams, he had no intention to play conservatively. Another screen pass brought them in great field position for another TD and a 22-12 lead. The Cubs were making a strong statement, a statement that they indeed meant business. Those cold stares and deep-seated feelings about the importance of this game came out at that point. Story inside the story was Christian Jimenez, who had the fractured leg earlier in the season. He was back in the lineup and soon to make a big contribution in blocking for Trevin, quarterback, as he scored a key touchdown. I don't know how he got back in a play with a fractured tibia, but he got in there. It was now 36-12 and not over yet. You could sense Thomas Fuller's excitement as he describes the next few plays, which resulted in a turnover by Faith and an interception and a TD by Trevin Adams, making the score 42-12 at halftime. Chapter 35, and I'm almost through here, indeed a very telling and powerful segment. Chapter 35 was really powerful, I thought. It traced Keith Adams' journey as a young deaf boy and his love for football and his desire to play at the highest levels. After a very successful high school career, Keith landed in San Luis Obispo. We know that well, Cal Poly, where our grandson attends school. This is where the young man ran into a roadblock. No support, no friends, isolation. After an emotional conversation with his high school coach, this clearly outstanding young man moved to Gallaudet University, a school which I am quite familiar with, as it is an all-deaf school which plays Division III athletics. Keith joined the team and had a very fulfilling career. Met his wife-to-be, got married, and launched a career coaching which provided him with the opportunity to coach at an all-deaf school and bring his team to the very brink of greatness. Maybe this story is not just a story of the boys of Riverside, but also about the journey of a truly special man, Keith Adams. I think that this book would not be the same without telling his story. The teams came out after halftime with the Cubs kicking off and catching their opponent by surprise with an onside kick. Those of you who don't know what that is, when you kick off, usually kick it down the field, opposing team receives the ball, and they run back. Onside kick is like a bunt down the third base line, all right? And then the kicking team runs down the field and tries to recover it and gain possession and then score. Well, that's what they did. The Cubs recovered it and then promptly marched down the field for yet another score. Faith did eventually score 2 more times, but didn't come close enough to threaten the Cubs' lead. Clearly, the leader of the winning team was Trevin Adams, who played both ways, and with a level of determination that was truly amazing. The final score, 80-26, was a statement, but also in many ways a tribute to the team and their coaches. They tasted bitter defeat the year before. They took it and turned it around to use it as motivation to commit to what it takes to win. It was a statement about deaf people and how truly capable they are to compete in the world of sport and beyond. So my final comments are, I found the book to be intriguing and fascinating, if not educational. I give Thomas Fuller a great deal of credit for delving into areas that was not second nature to him, and I thought that was apparent to me. I could be wrong. He provided the reader with an opportunity to learn about several areas that are not necessarily common to them as well. It was a great real-life snapshot as to what it takes to be a winner, let alone a champion. I thought he had a gift for being able to put the reader right in the middle of the story. The author was truly a martyr himself in many ways, giving up his job for a year and exposing himself to the demanding world of competitive football and the incredible and challenging world of the deaf culture. The boys of Riverside were champions, and so was Thomas Fuller for this wonderful masterpiece. And that, my friends, is the end of my comments. So, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. All right, we have a few minutes. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Yes.
Great job, Lou. Thank you.
Yes, Dave.
I wanted to ask you, we saw in the book examples of how the players on the Cubs all being educated as well as they did because of ASL. How did you find the experience at RIT where you had deaf athletes that came in that may have played on teams that you had, with hearing? What you see now from what you experienced, what you read in the book, how did you feel that RIT was able to deal with the students and have cohesive teams?
There was a concerted effort across the university to provide in-service training, workshops, learning opportunities for faculty, staff, and certainly our coaches. So we were all given opportunities to grow and develop in that way and learn about the deaf culture, learn survival ASL, which we went to workshops one after another, and you have to use it to maintain it, to do it so beautifully as we see here. But there was a concerted effort in the community. And I think that the culture at RIT was such that it was a welcoming one. I don't think I ever saw any resentment either way. And if there was, we would work with it. And so amongst our deaf population, there and in the team and for student athletes, it was in a lot of ways a bonding experience. So I think RIT in general handled it well. And in the athletic program, we did a good job. We had a lot of deaf students participating in sports successfully. And I don't remember any of them quitting and saying to me, Mr. Spiotti, I don't feel comfortable here.
Just one little follow-up, because I'm not aware of how this works. So the teammates would be hearing and deaf as well.
Right.
And they were able to communicate. Did the hearing athletes learn ASL so that they could communicate with each other?
We did not, Diane.
Team, it's kind of tricky.
Yeah, we did not necessarily require hearing students to learn ASL. Many of them, I shouldn't say many of them, some of them did become fairly proficient at it, and some of them were just survival stuff. And I think the deaf students who participated fully understood through their lives that there's going to be some who are going to be committed, some that are not. But there's an environment of welcoming, and that was more important necessarily than being proficient at sign language.
All right, who has not read the book? Who would like to read the book? Because Lou bought his own copy of the book. The friends had bought him a copy, but I would be happy to give this copy to someone who will
Could raffle it.
Who has not. Ooh, all right, who wants to read it? Who will read it? There we go. So thank you to the friends, and then thank you to Lou for donating his copy back. Do you have any last things that you want to say? We've already reached the end of our time.
This has been delightful. It was a great learning experience for me. Happy to see you here. I printed out some of my favorite sayings. So
Awesome.
I don't think there's enough for all of you, but if you wanted to pick one up, help yourself. I have a few books too that I think that might be interesting to you. I'll lay them out and you could take a look at them. Some of them are just straight out coaching football stuff, but some of them are very interesting, so you can look at them. Don't take them, okay?
If anyone wants a copy of any of the books, then head out to the info center after. Ask our librarians to place holds for you, or any of the movies. You can ask Lou again for any of those titles, and we can see if we can get any of those movies too. Thank you.
I'll stick around, yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
And thank